Welcome, everyone. I'm the Fanatical One, and the final four episodes of the Percy Jackson TV show have just been released. I'm going to give you my thoughts and review, and also break down some of the season. Once again, before we get any further into this, I will have to give you a massive spoiler warning, so make sure you've watched all 8 episodes of the Percy Jackson TV show. I'll also be talking about some of the big parts in the later Percy Jackson books, so now that you've been warned, let's hop right into this. Okay, opening episode 5, we get to see the aftermath of the fight with the Chimera, with cops and firefighters surrounding the arch. Looking at Annabeth and Grover, cops and a guy probably from inside the arch. This actually fits with the fugitive side story that's in the books, where mainly Percy is a fugitive. I wasn't actually expecting to see this in the TV show, as they cut out scenes like the bus explosion that normally leads to Percy being a fugitive. However, I'm glad they kept this in. We also get to see the fates in this episode, with Annabeth seeing them instead of Percy, which is how it happened in the books. In the books, they actually appeared a lot earlier in what would have been episode 1, but we didn't get to see them then. Also, Annabeth seeing them cut the strings is also a good change, in my opinion, because she's a lot closer to Luke than Percy is. Percibeth lovers actually ate so well this episode because look at this hug, man. Also, Grover being a third wheel, as always, is just hilarious to me. The trio's first interactions with Ares in this show are also great. Like I said in my last video, in my opinion, the show just keeps getting better and better, but I will have to talk about one outlier later on in this video. Ares also saying Twitter wars online is just hilarious to me, and it also does a great job of making the show fit into a more modern scene. One change I was a bit confused about was Grover staying behind and having to talk with Ares. I do like how we get to see more of the gods in this series, with Grover talking with Ares, which gives him more depth. As in the books, we only really got to see 3 gods in the first book. Later on in this episode, we also get to see Hephaestus. His actor does a really good job, and it also shows how not all of the gods are terrible, and that some of them are nicer, and hopefully we'll get to see some of the nicer gods later on in the series. The Tunnel of Love scene was changed quite a lot, but I do really love the scene in both the book and the TV show. We also got
What is love? Baby, don't hurt me.
this was really unexpected, but really hilarious to me. We also got to see more of Percy's water powers in the scene, which I was really happy about. I love it when they show his powers in the series. The change of having one of them to sacrifice themselves was also really unexpected. But I do like this change. However, I do feel like they are straying a bit further from the books with each episode, and this was really apparent in episode 6, which I'll go into with more detail later. Alrighty, I don't really know how I feel about episode 6. This is where the TV show really starts to diverge from the books, and I'm not sure I like all the changes. I know earlier I said that I liked seeing more of the gods in the TV show, and this is true. I love the flashbacks with Poseidon and Sally later on, but this episode made me not like seeing them too much, more specifically Hermes. I feel like he was only included in this episode to dump exposition, which really screws with the idea of the show not tell, which is what the show is doing a lot. I feel like this episode could have been better without the expo dump of Hermes, but ignoring that, the rest of the episode was pretty good. I like the changes of them knowing what the casino was and what it does to them, as this is their world and they should be knowing what's what and all of the different myths. In my opinion, the casino could have been more fun, as in the show, the casino looked just like a regular casino, which is pretty bland and boring if you compare it to what it looked like outside with the massive lotus flower. I also feel like it would have been cool to see the kids get more into the video games like Grover did, instead of them just getting lost in the casino. Like in the books, Annabeth got really into this architecture game. I also loved how we got both a Seaweed Brain and a Wise Girl drop in this episode. I always loved more Percibeth in the TV show, especially since it's this early on. Another change that I'm not sure how I feel about is the introduction to May Castellan, Luke's mother. Normally, we don't see or hear about her until The Last Olympian, but I feel like this is mainly due to Rick not knowing what he was going to write about when he first wrote The Lightning Thief, but now he does, which means he is able to make changes. So some things might appear a lot earlier on. One example of this is probably the Nico and Bianca reference we got, which was just really cool to see.
The least natural place in the world. Seems like a strange choice.
I didn't actually see this initially. I saw it online a few minutes after the episode release, which is just insane how some people are really good at finding these little Easter eggs. Another thing that people were talking about was how Percy forgot things about his quest and what he was doing, but he didn't forget about Annabeth, which was just really sweet. And it's a really cool parallel with something that happens after The Last Olympian. No spoilers, of course. I love how Annabeth really thought she could steal from the God of Thieves without getting caught. I love the little note from Hermes in front of the taxi, and just the entire scene of Percy driving. The detail where Percy crashes because he's too busy staring at Annabeth was really cute. Like I said before, I really, really love how they early on they're bringing in Percabeth because they're like one of my favorite couples in media and in books. When Percy was talking with the water nymph, I was really confused because they made two really big changes. The first being that the winter solstice had already passed, which like made me really, really confused because in the book they still had about a day to get the Master Bolt and get it back to Zeus. I feel like this change wasn't really that needed, but the other one, however, was really good. That being the change of three powers to four. Because I feel like this makes a lot of sense. Like Poseidon really loves Sally, and in the books, it doesn't make sense to only give them three. However, it does still stick to the books when Grover loses one of the powers in episode 7. Episode 7 actually opens with a scene that I wasn't expecting to see. If you watch my last video, you know that I was not expecting to see the Krusty's Waterbed Emporium scene to be adapted into the show. I was actually expecting them to find the DOA recording studios in some other way. However, it wasn't in the show, which was really sad because we don't get to see one of my favorite moments in the first book with Kieron asking how they died and them replying that they died in a massive bathtub. The whole scene with Krusty was changed quite a lot. In the show, they already knew who Krusty was and what his waterbed emporium is, which is one of the entrances to the underworld in the show. They also don't cut off his head in the show, and I think that's mainly due to Disney not wanting them to show a beheading on a show for a younger audience. But we did get a reference to that with Annabeth saying he's lucky that they're not cutting off his head. The underworld in the show looks incredible. However, for me personally, I pictured the underworld a lot differently from the show compared to when I was reading it, but I still really love the way that it looks. However, one problem that I did have, and I'm not sure if it was just the lighting in my room or something, but I felt that it was really dark for the scenes in the underworld. Like, I get that it's the underworld and it's meant to be dark, but like in some scenes, I just wasn't sure what was happening because it was just really hard to see. The scene with Cerberus is really cool. The CGI for him looks really incredible. But once again, I feel like they made some changes that didn't really have to be made. The first one was Grover being eaten. Like, I know this is how they got rid of the fourth pearl, but I feel like they could have lost it when Grover was being dragged into Tartarus or something. The change that Annabeth also didn't really befriend Cerberus like she did in the books was a little sad. Other than that, however, the scene was still really cool to see. Another change that was made was done to the fields of Asphodel, where they weren't just wandering souls who lived a mediocre life. They were changed to people who were bound by their regrets, which I feel like was another unnecessary change that wasn't really needed, as it was only really done to split up the group, which didn't even happen in the books. The scene, however, was pretty cool, and if I didn't read the books, I would have like zero problems with it. The scene with Grover getting dragged into Tartarus was really great in this episode. It's basically exactly how I imagined it in the books. I love the way that Percy immediately jumps towards Grover when he was being pulled into the pit to save him. It shows how good their friendship is already, and I'm really excited to see how much it grows later on, especially in the next season. Also, them finding the Master Bolt was really cool. The way that it looked is really epic, and the acting from the two was really great in the scene. Hades' palace looks really good in this episode. It's all inverted, which is how it's described in the books, being a replica of the palace on Mount Olympus. I really love Hades in this episode. He seems really nice, which is basically how he is in the original myths. I also really loved how confused Percy and Hades were in this. Just the huh from Hades was really funny, with him not wanting to have anything to do with his brothers. Percy also realizing that it was Kronos in the palace was a change. In the books, he suspected it a bit, but he had to get it confirmed by his father. But in here, he's really confident that it's Kronos. Hades also basically confirmed that it's Kronos with him wanting the bolt to protect himself. Alrighty, we have to talk about the flashback with Sally, Poseidon, and Percy. These scenes in this episode were really great, and I loved seeing little Percy and Sally being her best as a single parent. It's really sad to see how Percy thinks that his mum is just trying to get rid of him, even though she loves him so much. Also, the acting of young Percy is really good. The actor who portrays him really needs a raise because they're just really good. I really like how, as soon as Sally made an offering to Poseidon, he came. It's such a good change showing how Poseidon's really trying to be a good father, but him being a god prevented that. Also, the small detail of it starting to rain as soon as Sally made the offering was really cool. If I didn't know about Sally and Paul later on in the series, I would be rooting for Sally and Poseidon so hard because the show really makes Poseidon so sweet. This episode was so good. Starting off the episode, we got the Ares and Percy fight, as well as some of the Percy and Luke flashbacks. I really like these flashbacks as they show us more of Percy and Luke's relationship before the quest, which makes their friendship seem greater, and it also makes the betrayal hit harder for the non book readers. The Ares fight was also really epic to see adapted onto the screens. I really love the massive wave that crashed into Ares, and the CGI for it was really good as well. The golden ichor streaming from his thigh was also really cool to see and a nice book accurate touch. Also, the look on Annabeth's face when Percy won the fight was so sweet. I really love the acting from the main three, and I can't wait to see them in later seasons. Mount Olympus on the show was actually so beautiful. I love seeing all the minor gods and nymphs just chilling in their houses. The look of the 12 thrones was really cool with Zeus, Hera, and Poseidon each having their own unique thrones. I'm like really upset that Lance Frederick passed away because he played Zeus really well in this episode. He radiated this energy, and you could like feel that he was the king of Olympus. Also, Poseidon coming in to save Percy was just so sweet, and it was a nice change that I really loved because it shows how much he cares about Percy. The whole interaction with Poseidon and Percy was really sweet. Like you could just tell that Poseidon has so much to say to Percy that he just can't because he's a god. Also, there was one line that was cut from the show that was in the books that I was really hoping for, and that was the "Your mother was a queen among women" from Poseidon. However, the interaction that we did get to see was also really sweet. Also, the acting from Toby Stephens was also really good in the scene. The betrayal scene with Luke was really good. I know that I've said that a lot about the show, and I'm going to say it more because it's true. The scene was a highly anticipated scene amongst book readers, and I believe that they delivered. The scene was changed quite a lot, but I'm good with all the changes because it's just really good. In the show, instead of Luke trying to kill Percy with the pit scorpion, he tries to recruit him. Backbiter, Luke's sword, also looks really cool in this as well. They changed it so it could like teleport people around, which was also pretty cool. Annabeth also being there invisible was a change that I thought was quite good, as it makes the scene really heartbreaking. As in the book, she was only told what happened. However, here she's there, and it just makes it a lot sadder for her. One thing I do want to talk about is how smart Percy is in the show. For most of the scenes where the kids are like smarter and they know what's going on and all the myths, I've liked those changes, but I feel like for this scene with Luke and Percy, I feel like Percy was a bit too smart for a 12-year-old boy. Like, I feel like he should have been more naive and maybe have him like slowly figure it out as Luke was talking. But he just went straight into knowing basically everything that happened with Luke. Once again, Jason Mantzoukas really shows how funny he is as Dionysus, as the interaction between him and Percy was really funny, with him getting his name wrong, just like in the books. Also, him screaming at the campus to just get out was such a funny thing and something that Dionysus would do. The post-credit scene was also really cool to see. I wasn't sure how they were going to get rid of Gabe, and I think the way they did it in the show with all the changes was perfect. Personally, I think that in the show, Sally shouldn't have killed Gabe since he wasn't shown to be abusive, and I think that him basically getting himself killed was a good change for how he acted in the show. Now that I've finished the breakdown and comparisons of the episodes, I'm going to rank the 4 episodes in the second half of the season of the Percy Jackson TV show. Now, coming in at fourth is definitely episode 6. The Lotus Casino scene was alright, but there were a few changes in this episode that I didn't like, and I feel like those changes outweighed the ones that I did like. That means episode 6 comes in last for the 4 episodes in the second half of the season. For a rating, I would give this episode about a 5 out of 10, as it just wasn't really for me. Coming in at third, we have episode 7. This episode was really good, but in my opinion, the other 2 episodes are better. This episode did have some stunning details in CGI, like I loved the underworld and Hades, and the Cerberus scene was pretty good as well. Overall, this episode is just pretty good compared to the other ones, which is why I would give this episode about 7 out of 10. In second for this half of the season, we have episode 5. Kicking in the second half of the season, this episode was really good. It gave me high hopes for the rest of the season, and I loved the various scenes and changes that they did. My favorite was definitely the Tunnel of Love changes and the first seaweed rain mention. Also, seeing Hephaestus was a change that I really enjoyed, as I always love seeing more of the gods. For a rating, I would give this episode about an 8 out of 10. Which, of course, means that coming in first is the season finale, episode 8. This episode was so good, and a great tribute to Lance Reddick being one of the last things that he filmed before his passing. The acting in this episode by everyone was phenomenal, and the scenes were all stunning and amazing. I think this episode is almost perfect, meaning I'm going to give this episode a 9.5 out of 10. The first season of Percy Jackson and the Olympians was amazing, and I loved being able to see all my favorite characters in a good adaptation, and I can't wait for the next seasons. Overall, the season was really good, but I feel like they did diverge a bit too far from the book sometimes, but that's alright with me as I do trust Rick with all of his creations. But with that being said, that's everything for my thoughts and reviews of the second half of the Percy Jackson TV show. If you have any thoughts, theories, or queries, leave them in the comment section. But other than that, thank you for watching this video and enjoy the rest of your day.